Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. It's time for the royal news. And this week, we're going to do stories about President Trump and First Lady Melania's trip to England. I watched some of it on television, and it looked really nice, so I thought I would do some stories to cover their visit. The first story comes from the New York Post. Royals pull out the stops for Trump with state dinner menu, including nod to Perez's Scottish heritage with drink selection. This is by Diana Narosi and Caitlin McCormick, and it was published on September 17th, 2025, Windsor, England. The menu for Wednesday's state banquet at the Windsor Castle with President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, King Charles III, and Queen Camilla was full of subtle nods to the commander-in-chief. The first course consisted of watercress panna cotta and quail egg salad or Parmesan shortbread. It was followed by free-range Norfolk chicken ballotins in zucchini coats, Spanish beans, spiced pumpkin with toasted seeds, buttered chard, and fondant potatoes. President Trump, who is well known for his love of ice cream, was treated to a vanilla ice cream bomb with Kentish raspberry sorbet and lightly poached Victoria plums. That sounds good. After dinner, drinks included a vintage 1945 port, the closest to Trump's birth year the palace has, a 1912 cognac, the year of Trump's mother's birth in Scotland, Bowmore Queen's Cask, 1980 single malt Scotch whiskey, and yes, the famously teetotaling president will be quaffing soft drinks during the dinner. Trump's wine and dined at the White Tie state dinner, where he was sandwiched between His Majesty and Kate Middleton, comes less than a day after his arrival for his historic second state visit to the United Kingdom. The president joked he hopes no successor of his ever tries to attempt 2 state visits. Trump's last official trip across the pond was in 2019, hosted by Queen Elizabeth II. Ahead of the extravagant dinner, he spent some time at the late monarch's tomb and left a wreath of flowers. The special relationship between the U.S. and UK hung over the president's visit as the world leaders volleyed between a wide range of pertinent issues. Trump was quick to note that the traditional meetings between the countries are something surely neither Washington nor King George III could possibly have imagined. During dinner, King Charles continuously praised Trump for his peacemaking efforts, including trying to broker a deal in the Russia-Ukraine war. The royal also called for the preservation of nature, citing it as part of our legacy for centuries to come. Trump is set to wrap up the visit by Thursday and will return home to the U.S. just in time for the Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk's funeral, scheduled for Sunday afternoon in Arizona. The second story comes from the BBC. King and Trump hail the UK-US special relationship in a state banquet speech, September 17th. This is by Sean Coughlin, royal correspondent. King Charles has commended Donald Trump's personal commitment to finding solutions to some of the world's most intractable conflicts, as he called for the U.S. support for the Ukraine against tyranny in a speech at the U.S. state visit banquet. In response, the U.S. president hailed the special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K., saying the word special does not begin to do it justice. The King's speech at the lavish dinner for 160 guests in Windsor Castle emphasized the deep connections between the two countries and the need to maintain cultural, trading, and military links. Our people have fought and died together for the values we hold dear, said the King. The state visit will continue on Thursday with Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales attending events with First Lady Melania Trump. It will move from a royal spectacle to political talks and a news conference as Trump travels to meet Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at his country house, Chequers. The state banquet on Wednesday came at the end of a day of in politics where the president was welcomed to Windsor by the King, Queen, and a lineup of senior royals. When they arrived, President and Melania Trump stepped out of the ornate carriages inside the castle's scenic quadrangle before an inspection of troops on the perfectly prepared lawns. The Prince and Princess of Wales were also there to welcome the U.S. visitors in this royal charm offensive. holding a warm and friendly private meeting with the Trumps. In his banquet speech, the president praised Prince William, saying he would be an unbelievable success in the future, and called Catherine radiant and so healthy and so beautiful. Trump's historic second state visit showed a good relationship between king and president, including some friendly moments when they watched the ceremonial parade. The king jokingly seemed to be warning the president to watch out for the sword of one of the soldiers on parade. Trump showed great interest when he was shown around St. George's Chapel, saying, "What a place, what a place." Looking at the Royal Collection's historic documents about U.S. independence, he commented, "The real deal." The president has been a long-time admirer of the late Queen Elizabeth, and he laid a wreath and paid his respects at her tomb in Windsor. And official gifts were exchanged, including giving the visiting president the flag that was flying over Buckingham Palace on the day of Trump's inauguration in January 2025. State visits are a form of soft power diplomacy used in royal hospitality to build relations with important international partners, with none more important than the U.S. That includes business links with more heads of technology firms such as Apple's Tim Cook and Sam Altman of artificial intelligence firm OpenAI at the state banquet than celebrities. Alongside the state visit, the £150 British note of U.S. investment into the U.K. was announced, including 22 British pounds from Microsoft. Press Baron Rupert Murdoch was at the banquet, sitting next to the Prime Minister's advisor Morgan McSweeney at the dinner where guests were given a main course of Norfolk organic chicken. As well as hailing the value of the U.S. and U.K.'s partnership, the king stressed the importance of protecting the environment, saying there was a precious opportunity to safeguard and to restore the wonders and beauties of nature for the generations who follow us. The banquet concluded a day of events intended to make a positive impression on the president and a shock and awe display of pageantry. With 1,300 servicemen and women from the Army, Royal Navy, and Royal Air Force taking part, this is the largest ever guard of honor planned for a state visit to the UK. The much bigger than usual military lineup for the state visit was the UK government's message to encourage the U.S. to maintain its commitment to NATO and support Ukraine. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer joined Trump to watch a flypast by the Red Arrows over Windsor, although a planned flypast by F-35 fighter jets was stopped by poor weather conditions. The royal spectacle seemed to have appealed to the president, who described his state visit as one of the highest honors of his life. But unlike other recent state visits, there were no moments visible to the public, with all events taking place behind the walls of Windsor Estate or at the Prime Minister's country estate, Chequers. A protest against the visit was held in London, but there was also anti-Trump placards in Windsor, out of sight from the U.S. visitors. Protesters included the anti-monarchy group Republic, whose chief executive, Graham Smith, said, "It's time to fix our democracy and defend the country from those who might want to undermine what democratic rights we have, whether that be Charles or Trump." The third and last story comes from the BBC also. Donald Trump's second UK state visit. Here's what we know. And this was published on September the 18th by Jennifer Clark, BBC News. On the second day of his UK state visit, U.S. President Donald Trump joined Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at his country estate. Trump paid tribute to what he called the unbreakable bond between the countries. What was Trump's agenda on Thursday? After being hosted at Windsor Castle, the president said goodbye to King Charles III and Queen Camilla on Thursday morning. He then traveled to the Prime Minister's country home, Chequers, in Buckinghamshire. He was greeted by Sir Keir and his wife, Lady Starmer, and a guard of honor. The President and Prime Minister viewed the Sir Winston Churchill archives before holding a private meeting. Speaking ahead of a reception of business leaders and Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Trump praised the U.S. and UK special relationship. He described his second state visit as an exquisite honor, and the two leaders confirmed that they have signed a new technology partnership, which Starmer said would see billions flowing both ways of the Atlantic. Trump and Starmer held a joint press conference before the president began his journey home. Melania Trump initially remained at Windsor Castle, where she toured the Royal Library and saw Queen Mary's dollhouse, a famous miniature palace built in the 1920s. She then met Chief Scout Dwayne Fields with Catherine, who was joint president of the Scout Association. They joined a meeting of young scouts for some arts and crafts and took part in a game featuring a giant parachute filled with balls. What did Trump do on Tuesday and Wednesday? On Wednesday, Trump and the First Lady flew to Windsor by helicopter, where they were greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales. They were then formally welcomed by the King and Queen before joining them in a carriage procession through the Windsor estate. A royal salute was fired in Windsor and at the Tower of London, and the King invited Trump to inspect the Guard of Honor. After a private lunch with members of the royal family, the president visited St. George's Chapel in Windsor and laid a wreath on the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II. The president and the royal party watched it fly past by the Red Arrows, although the aerial display was sealed back because of poor weather, so did not feature UK and US F-35 military jets as planned. On Wednesday evening, a traditional state banquet was held at the castle, attended by 160 guests, including media mogul Rupert Murdoch and Apple boss Tim Cook. Trump spoke warmly about the UK-US relationship, saying, "The word special does not begin to do it justice." The King praised the U.S. president for his personal commitment to finding solutions to world's conflicts. On Tuesday evening, the Trumps landed in the UK at Stansted Airport, where they were met by U.S. Ambassador Warren Stevens and Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper. The Viscount Hood, Lord-in-Waiting, welcomed them on behalf of the King. The couple spent the night at the U.S. Ambassador's residence, Winfield House, in central London. What vehicles and personnel did Trump bring to the UK? Accompanying Trump were U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and other senior White House staff. Trump arrived in the UK on his customized high-spec Boeing 747-200B aeroplane known as Air Force One. Once on the ground, the president traveled in Cadillac One, an enhanced limousine nicknamed the Beast. Two identical versions of the presidential limousine, as well as several other Secret Service vehicles, were flown over to the UK in military cargo planes in advance of Trump's arrival. While Trump made some short journeys by limousine in the UK, most of his traveling was by air. The president brought a Marine One helicopter with him, which, like Air Force One, is not specific aircraft, but instead refers to any U.S. Marine Corps aircraft carrying the president. The president's security has been tightened in recent days following the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk at a university in Utah. What is a state visit? A state visit is a formal trip to the UK by the head of a country. They are usually arranged at the invitation of the monarch, acting on government advice. As well as being grand occasions, the visits are used by governments to further Britain's interests. The president was hosted on the first state visit by the late Queen Elizabeth II in June 2019 during his first term as president. Traditionally, U.S. presidents serving a second term are not offered a state visit. Instead, they are invited for tea or lunch with the monarch, as would happen with former presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush. However, in February, Sir Keir handed Trump an invitation from King Charles during a White House meeting to discuss UK-US trade deal. The Prime Minister said the invite was truly historic and unprecedented. What protests have taken place during Trump's state visit? Thousands of people gathered near the BBC's headquarters in London on Wednesday afternoon before marching towards Whitehall. Some carried banners reading "No to Racism, No to Trump." Others had smaller versions of the 20-foot Trump baby blimp balloon, which was carried through the crowds during protests against the U.S. president's first state visit in 2019. The demonstration was organized by a Stop Trump UK coalition, a group of more than 50 campaign organizations, including climate, anti-racism, and pro-Palestinian activists. It previously called on the government to cancel the state visit, accusing the U.S. president of denying climate science and siding with war criminals in Israel, Russia, and beyond. There were also some anti-Trump protesters among the crowds in Windsor on Wednesday. 4 men who were arrested after images of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were projected onto Windsor Castle had been bailed. The footage appeared on Tuesday night as Trump touched down in the UK. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Edward Davey had previously said he would boycott the ceremonial banquet for Trump to send a message over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Which other state visits has King Charles hosted? Since King Charles succeeded Queen Elizabeth in September 2022, he's hosted state visits from a number of international leaders and royals. July 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. December 2024, Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and his wife Sheikha Jawar bint Hamad bin Suham Al Thani. June 2024, Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako of Japan. November 2023, South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol and his wife Kim Kyung-hee. He and Queen Camilla have carried out state visits to France, Italy, Germany, Kenya, and Samoa. Well, I'll end the video here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so, it would help the channel to grow, as well as giving it a thumbs up. It's all a great help. And if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it lets you know when a video is posted. More importantly, I want to wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.